Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Can everybody hear me? And if you just nod, you can hear me and see me. Yeah, good. Okay. Well, it's 2 o'clock and time to open this hearing session on matter 3. That's housing provision with particular reference to Gypsy and traveller accommodation. So just for the record and for those who've not met me before, I'm Mike Hayden. I'm a Chartered Town Planner. I've been appointed jointly with Karen Baker, who's also on screen, who's a Chartered Town Planner as well. We've been appointed by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government to hold this examination into the soundness of the Ipswich Borough Local Plan review and to produce a report of our conclusions and recommendations with regard to soundness. Just a couple of preliminaries really, and then I'll just briefly run through some procedures and then ask people to introduce themselves. So can I just remind everybody, I'm sure you've done this, if you just have your mobile phones or other electronic devices switched to silent, please, whilst we're in the hearing session. Could you please also ensure that your microphone is muted as you have until you're invited to speak, and that way we can just avoid any disturbance from background noise or feedback from computers or microphones. That would be good, thank you. Just to remind everybody, this session is being live streamed and it's being recorded by the Council. The recording will be published on the Council's YouTube channel with a link from the examination website for any interested parties to view after the event. So just to clarify, our role as inspectors is to assess whether the plan satisfies the requirements of the 2004 Act, the relevant regulations, and also whether it's sound. In order to be sound, the National Planning Policy Framework states the plan should be positively prepared, justified, effective, and consistent with national policy. You'll have met Annette Feeney, who is the Programme Officer. I'm sure Annette, thank you, Annette. So again, just to clarify, and for those observing or joining us for the first time, Annette works for us, for Ms Baker and I, works independently from the Council, and just outside of the hearing sessions, if you could make contact with, if you want to make contact with us, then if you could do so via Annette as the Programme Officer. Thank you. Thanks, Annette. Okay, just a couple of things on the procedures for today, for this afternoon. So we're using the same procedures as we have in previous sessions. So we've outlined those in previous hearing sessions, but essentially it's the procedures set out in our guidance note and also in the virtual hearing etiquette guidance. So hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to familiarise themselves with that. We sent those to participants in advance. This hearing session is programmed to finish by 3:30, so I hope we can achieve that today. The hearing will be in the form of structured discussion as previously, so I will lead that following the agenda we've circulated, and that agenda, as you'll realise, is based on the matters, issues and questions paper that we previously circulated. My colleague Ms Baker may also have some questions as we go through. So what I'll do is I'll invite people to speak at particular times, but if you have something that you want to contribute to a particular part of the discussion, if you can just indicate using the raised hand function on Zoom, or failing that, just waving into your camera, and hopefully one of us will notice you. Thank you. For that reason, we ask that you keep your cameras switched on for the entire session, but your microphone's muted until you're invited to speak. And can I also just remind participants in respect of evidence, so you should have provided all your evidence in your original representation, and just to say the hearing is not the opportunity to submit anything further, that is, unless as inspectors we ask for it. Any comments you make during the hearing should therefore relate to the points you've made in your original representations. We have read your representations, we've read your hearing position statements and the relevant and the related evidence. So again, no need to repeat what you've said already. However, clearly the purpose of this session is for us to seek clarification on your evidence. So we may well ask you to clarify points that you've made in your evidence, but also to seek any further information we need to address any outstanding questions that we have. So that's all. Does everybody have any questions at this stage? Okay, great. And if I can then ask participants to introduce themselves, please, starting with the council. Mr. Fur, do you want to introduce yourself and your team? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. My name's Isabella Tefor, and I'm a barrister providing legal advice to Ipswich Borough Council. And I have with me on screen Mrs. Sally Minns, who you've heard from before, and Dr. Kate Ross-Ryan from RRR Consultancy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Minns and Dr. Ross-Ryan. And I think for East Suffolk Council, Ms. McMillan, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Yes, my name's Andrea McMillan. I'm a principal planner in the planning policy team at East Suffolk Council, and I'm attending this afternoon should the inspectors have any questions that they wish to ask to East Suffolk Council.
Okay, thank you. Is it Miss or Mrs. McMillan?
It's Mrs.
Mrs. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's good. We'll just move on to the first question in that case. Okay, so I'm going to work through the 4 questions that we asked in the MIQs, and I've got some supplementaries on each of those. So if we can start with question 49 and also the updated evidence that's been provided by RRR Consultancy. So question 49 read, how does the updated evidence on the need for and supply of accommodation for gypsies and travellers set out in the response from RRR Consultancy compare with the 2017 Gypsy Traveller, the needs assessment, D17? In particular, where have the 6 additional pitches been created, and how have the accommodation needs of the 6 families who've moved off the site been met? So council has provided a response to that question. Obviously, that question followed the additional evidence or the supplementary evidence provided by RRR Consultancy. What I did want to seek some clarification on was the figures. If I can just ask you to kind of take me through those figures, that would be helpful. So I think either Mrs. Minns or Dr. Ross-Ryan, if you could just take me through this. So firstly, if you could just explain the changes in the supply of a need for pitches for gypsy and traveller accommodation since the 2017 accommodation needs assessment. And I appreciate you've set it out in your note, Dr. Ross-Ryan, but I wondered if you might be able to just kind of take me through the changes to the figures that are in the ISPA. I think it's table A3 in the 2017 needs assessment. So it's effectively the table of figures. And what I have been struggling to do is to relate your figures to that table of figures just to see how the figures are updated. So I wondered if either Mrs. Minns or Dr. Ross-Ryan could just take me through those figures, and I'll just make some amendments here, but I think it would be helpful to have an updated set of figures against those, please.
Right. Good afternoon. My name's Sally Minns, as I say, and I'm head of planning policy. What's important, I think, is just to understand where the original needs as identified have come from. The ANA was not something which just was provided for Ipswich. It came through ISPA, and all the ISPA authority figures were included. And I think the other point to make about the original supply is that the document is robust. It's successfully gone through the Suffolk Coastal Local Plan Inquiry examination in 2019, and Andrea can mention something about that if she wants to. East Suffolk is a combination of both Suffolk Coastal District Council and Waveney District Council, which lies to the north.
I understand that, Mrs. Means. What I want to focus
Yeah.
on is the changes.
So basically, the ANA 2017 identified that there's tables at the back, which is probably the most reliable because you've got it all in one place under page 118. So the requirement was for the first 5 years to have 13 units. And the requirement for Ipswich to the end of the planned period was 27 units, and that included the 13 in the first 5 years.
Okay.
Now, what happened was, in terms of the 6, there was originally a lot of the site was laid out in terms.
Sorry, Mrs. Means, which 6 are we talking about?
The 6 that you mentioned, you were talking about the difference in the 2017 ANA and the 2020 calculations.
Yeah. So indeed, and what I was asking, so there are 6 additional pitches and 6 families who moved off site. So
yeah,
just take me through those 2 respective figures, please.
Right. Basically, the 6 that moved off site moved out of the Ipswich area. So they were not anymore part of our need. So we didn't have to accommodate them because they were no longer living within the district boundary. And then in terms of which
site did they move from? Which site did they move from?
Oh, sorry. Yes, they moved from the West Meadow site.
Thank you.
So that the West Meadow site is the larger of the 2 sites which actually lie within the district boundary. And that was where they came from. Then in terms of the way the site is actually laid out, West Meadows itself, there were a number of sites which were laid as double pitches. So what happened was, in fact, that 2 of the pitches were subdivided. So in effect, you got the extra 4. And then because effectively they created 6, but then you have to take 2 off for the 2 that were already there. So that created 4. Kate, can you enlarge upon the other 2, please?
Just wanted to clarify that the calculation, as been discussed, was preliminary findings and is to be confirmed based on revisiting the site. And so it's preliminary results and needing to be checked by a site visit and consultation with the families. But some of the pictures have been, whereas Sally refers to, were actually double pictures. And some of the pictures have been based on an open plan style and have been split into 2 or used as open plan. So there's more than one pitch on what was initially regarded as a pitch. But this needs to be checked and seen what the latest is by site visit. Because of COVID, we've been unable to do that. Unable to check that and to be able to consult with the families directly. So it's been based on a range of other forms of consultation, but does need to be confirmed.
Okay, so
I think the question, sorry. I think the question is, there's reference to 6 pitches being created on the 2 sites in the note. Mrs. Minns has mentioned 4 of them. Where are the other 2?
That is similar to
that, Dr. Russ-Ryan. Sorry, can I just clarify? So the information is based on, it's not based on a visual observation of these additional pitches. What is it based on?
It's based on a number of interviews with the parties. So I gave Kate a list of key individuals who are involved in the supply of both the transit side of things and also who have various responsibilities within the council, because within Ipswich, the Gypsy and traveller provision is formally sort of based in the housing team and not the planning team.
So West Meadows was formerly a local authority site?
Yes, it started off as a local authority site. If I refer you to my topic paper, that explains, I think that's paper 47, D47, that will actually explain the evolution. But it went from us to the county council and then to a private management consultancy.
So
and what's happening there is that the basic formula for what they are, how they're involved, is that they are selling off plots at a very cheap rate, and are basically moving away from Gypsy provision, I think.
Okay, so the interviews were with who? Sorry, you said various parties.
Yeah, so there was and the Norfolk County Council. There is the community.
Suffolk County Council, you mean?
Yeah, because basically Norfolk and Suffolk do share things quite a lot. So there was basically a new post created.
County Council, yeah.
Sorry, Norfolk, yeah.
With Gypsy liaison officers at the county council. That's who the interviews were with, yeah.
Well, yes, it was. Well, yes, there was the director of commissioning communities. I don't know the
precise titles. I just want to know. You mentioned various parties.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah. So Norfolk County Council, the environmental health people who monitor unauthorised use, the member, the head of housing, who is responsible and attends the strategic meeting, because there are two arms of where we work collaboratively. One is a strategic function where high-level officers attend, and then there's an operational meeting where you get more wide sort of attendance of people who.
Just stop you there. I don't need to know the detail of their particular roles. What I'm trying to understand is the authenticity of the data, the updated data that we have in front of us. I'm just trying to understand if there were no visual surveys of the site. How do we know that these additional pitches have been created? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Right, okay. So, and there is an officer who's been appointed across the authorities, who is located in East Suffolk, and he works part-time, and he has been moving forward the transit agenda. And I understand that there are most of the information on that is not in the public domain, but I think it's fair to say that they've been moving forward 3 sites somewhere within Suffolk. I can't really say any
transit sites at the moment. Sorry, I don't know what the transit sites. I'm just trying to understand, if nobody visited the site, how do we know the additional pitches have been created? Do you just? That's the question I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, well, we've got a 2020 aerial survey of the whole district. So we've got photographic evidence of what the sites look like now.
So it's based on aerial surveys.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned consultation with. Has there been any consultation with families?
Well, what's happened is, in Kate's role, she constantly has consultation with and liaises with the Gypsy and travelling community. But specifically, because of COVID, what's happened is largely the travelling community have not been travelling while COVID has happened. And what's happened nationwide, and it is reflected in Ipswich as well, is that the travelling community have been sheltered by existing travelling and travellers and gypsies who are already on sites in permanent pitches. So in fact, the risk of COVID is much, much higher than it would be in the general population, and it's not actually being safe to go out onto the site because of that.
Yeah, so I understand that. So just to clarify, the data on the additional 6 pitches, or the additional 4 at West Meadows, let's say, is based on an aerial survey.
Yes, we've got the aerial survey and talking to key individuals, as I explained, both within the housing team and environmental health, and also the county council.
How do they know?
Well, they know because they have regular feedback from the other organisations, such as the Gypsy and Liaison Officer, the police, social services, education, who do have more of a regular relationship with the Gypsy and Traveller community.
Okay, so I'm sorry to be so detailed about this, but it is important. Obviously, it's made quite a significant difference to your figures in the first part of the survey period. So there's been an aerial survey. On the basis of that aerial survey, you've asked specific questions of the local authority housing staff and the Gypsy liaison officers based in other organisations. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and yes, and based within.
Let me just finish the question.
Sorry.
Confirm that there are 4 additional pitches on this site, have they?
Yes.
And how do they know? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, well, because it was to do with the subdivision of these particular sites, and also they were tracking what's happening to the actual pitches themselves, because obviously if they went through sale, then there's going to be a record of that sale, and then that would appear on the usual God, what's the name of them? The organisation that actually registers sales.
That's,
yes, thank you. It went from my head.
Records of sales. Okay.
Yeah.
So that deals with the 4, but I think there were 2 others.
Yes, there are two Gypsy pitches at Henniker Way, which is, so you've got that, and you've also got the larger site.
Yeah. So 2 Gypsy pitches at Henniker Way, which have been...
Is in Suffolk, yeah. In Ipswich, rather, sorry, yes.
Been created since the 2017.
I'll just check the planning permission. I have got a note of all of the planning permissions.
Well, I'm presuming because they're part of your 6, aren't they?
Yes, I presume, yes, I think they are. They must be. Let me just have a look at the site history. Yes, because West Meadows, the first applications for that came in 1982, so that's been a much longer established site.
Yeah, just ask Henniker Way now. Just tell me.
Yeah, actually, that's quite old as well. No, that doesn't. Well. Yeah, it says it's 163 Henniker Road, and the last planning permission actually was in 1981. So the site was set out in 1981, but there are 2 pitches there now, which are complete.
Just try and listen to my guidance here, please. I think Dr. Russ Ryan wants to come in at this point. Just hold you there and ask Dr. Russ Ryan to come in and just explain that, please. So the 2 additional pitches.
All 6 are on the large site, through double pitches being used as 2, and further parts of the land in the area being used as sites. But this needs, as I said, needs to be confirmed by a site visit and consultation with the families. But it does demonstrate the potential that land has, that site has, of addressing the need of those families on that site.
So I've got an aerial photograph of the West Meadows site up just from Google. Obviously, I don't know how old that is, but so I can see that there's land. I can see the pitches, the road layout, and I can see there's land around those pitches as well. Is that what you're referring to?
A combination of the 2, yes. That some of the existing pitches are used for more than a pitch, and also land around it. So some of the double pitches, which got permission as a double pitch, have been split into more than 1 pitch or used as an open plan style. And also these are things what we've been told, but as we've stated before and as the council have stated, it is to be confirmed as to where this is at. And can I also just note that the planning for the first 5-year period is actually to 2021, which does enable the council to have time to review that. The first 5-year need is being addressed and because they have identified this site, and using the opportunity to work with the families to address that and issues raised above and beyond the accommodation need issues for that site.
Okay, thank you. So that's the 6 additional pitches. So going back to table A3 in the 2017 ANA. Yeah, do you have that in front of you, Dr. Russ Ryan?
Yes, I do, yes.
Yeah. So where I've got 39 pitches, that should be 45 now. Yeah.
Not 45. No, 43. 45 altogether. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
To be confirmed.
No, I understand that. No need to.
The potential is there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 45. And then as I go down the list, the number of unused residential pitches available in the 2017 survey said 5. Is that still the same?
From what I've been told.
Yeah.
But that needs confirmation as well.
Okay. And the number of existing pitches expected to become vacant through mortality, does that remain the same? So that was 2016 to 2021, it was 1.
We don't have any other data confirming that one way or the other, yeah. But we are aware of other households who have left the site since the ANA.
Yeah.
There were changes during the time that from the assessment of the need to the completion of the report. Even within that time, things changed on that site, which is referred to within the report.
Yeah. And
I mean, what we've been made aware from families that there have been people who've moved off that site since, etc.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I'm just trying to understand the detail of those figures.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Sorry.
Yeah. So I understand you said 6 families have moved off, out of the district, moved off site, so moved off the West Meadows site. What I'm trying to understand is how that translates into the 2017 ANA table. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to ask you to help me with. And I appreciate all these figures have to be confirmed, but yeah, so, sorry, you were going to say something, Dr. Ross Ryan.
6 are not part of the supply in the 2017 ANA. They're not included in that first part of the ANA.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the 2017 data, ANA data, you have updated that at 2020. But what I didn't have in front of me was an equivalent version of the 2017 table A.3 for Ipswich. And what I was trying to do was to understand how the updated data you've given me translates back into that table.
So would it help if we provide you with an updated table after this session? We're happy to do that.
Indeed it would.
Yeah.
But I need to understand it for the purposes
certainly, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So as I understand it then, so just to make things simpler, we have 6 additional pitches which are at West Meadows. Yeah. We've got 6 families who have moved off of the West Meadows site.
Yeah.
So presumably that makes a net increase of 12. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's also another figure that says there's 4, in terms of the need, there have been 4 families who have left the borough and their needs have been met elsewhere. Is that in addition to the 6 that have left the West Meadows site and gone elsewhere?
Yes, I think so, isn't it, Kate? That is additional.
They are included. They are additional, but it's part of their need came from the families who have left the site. But can also confirm this is to be confirmed by the site visit and consultation with the families.
Dr. Ross Ryan, I think the point the inspector's made is he understands that everything that you say is to be confirmed. but you don't need to repeat it in respect of every point, because at the moment he's just trying to understand figures that he needs to input into table A.3 instead of the figures that are there already. So he understands all that needs to be checked because you haven't been able to have contact with the families. But at the moment, he's just looking for the figures to input into table A.3 in order to update it.
Okay.
Well, I think I've heard enough to realise it's probably too complicated to try and discuss now. So what I'm going to ask is that you please update table A3 with the updated information that you have and submit that to us so that we can understand that. And my next question is, presumably with the updated data, does the plan need to be updated to reflect the updated evidence as at 2020 in respect to need and supply?
I don't think so, because the way that we've taken, the approach that we've taken is through providing a sort of criteria-based policy for what is actually suitable. And we're actually taking a different approach compared to the West Meadow site, because the Henniker Road site has proved to be extremely successful. There has been no complaints at all, as far as I'm aware, about that site itself, and it allows greater assimilation within the settled community. And it doesn't, it's seen as less of a threat by those who feel that way inclined. So the approach that we're taking is to allow for smaller.
Before we come on to that, I'll
yeah, okay.
My question is, does the data in policy CS11 and also in the supporting text does the plan need to be amended to update that data? So currently the plan says there's a need for 27 pitches, permanent pitches for 2036, and a need for 13 in the first 5-year period, 16.
Yes, we'll have to update that. Yes, of course.
Dr. Russ Ryan, yeah.
Can I just say that it's not necessarily need updated because the council are aiming to meet their 27 need. There's a potential that they by next year, if they've not already done so on that site, have met some of their first 5-year need. And that is what you're talking about, confirming and clarifying. But they're still in their time frame. They've not passed any of their time frame to address that 27 need, which is identified in the local plan. That's another way of looking at it.
I thought the need in the first 5-year period had reduced from 13 to 9 though.
Yes, yes, that has, and that is through that's being confirmed through various conversations with key individuals, both within the authority and outside.
So why would you still be looking to meet a need of 27 over the planned period?
Well, the 27 over the planned period includes the first 5 years. Yeah. So yeah, well, that will need to be reduced to reflect the existing provision.
The questions I have are very simple, so please don't try and read into them any more than I'm asking. Simply asking, if your figures have changed, does the plan need to be modified to reflect?
Yes, of course. No, I accept that. And definitely the points that you've raised are things we will have to adjust.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move off of question 49, come to questions 50 and 51, and if we just take those together, and I've got some supplementary questions to ask on those. So question 50 is, in the absence of the allocation of any new Gypsy and traveller accommodation sites within the plan, so accepted there's West Meadows and a small site at Henniker Way, 2, how and where will the need for additional permanent pitches which are required between 2021 and 2036 be met within the borough during the plan period to ensure compliance with paragraph 10 of the planning policy statement on traveller needs? And then 51 is, question 51 is, should the council look to identify smaller sites now rather than leaving it to normal development management functions as proposed in the amendments to policy CS11? So and thank you for the answers that you've given to those questions. If I can just ask for some clarification on a couple of matters. So I note the work the council is doing to identify sites, and I note that from your evidence. So I note the suggested changes to policy CS11 in respect of that. I note those have been agreed with the surrounding local authorities as well. And I note that the statement in the suggested modification that if progress does not move forward, the council will conduct a review within 5 years, and the results of that would be fed into the next local plan as positive allocation. So effectively, if you don't find anything within the next 5 years, you will then allocate sites in the next plan. So I understand that. However, paragraph 10 of the PPTS makes it clear that plans should provide a supply of deliverable sites to meet the first 5 years of need, and to identify specific developable sites or broad locations for development to meet needs for years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. You'll be familiar with that. So, even on the basis of the revised need figures that you provided to me, there would still be a need for 13 permanent pitches from 2021 to 2036, which the plan at the moment doesn't identify a deliverable or developable supply for, nor indeed, as far as I can see, a guaranteed means of meeting that need other than working collectively with the adjoining authorities and also with families in need. So I think the question still remains to me, in the light of the quantified need, the revised quantified need, but the absence of sites, does the plan comply with paragraph 10 of the PPTS, which requires that 5-year supply?
Well, I think it's two things really. Firstly, it's the scale of what we're proposing for additional sites, but also, and I think it would be useful if I shared perhaps this 2020 aerial photograph of the larger site, if you wish to, not now, but I mean, if you wanted to see that, because it's quite clear there is sufficient land to accommodate additional pitches, which will meet at least half, if not more, depending on what the community thinks about that. Now, in terms of our approach, the reason we haven't put sites in is because they're very small within a threshold. And in fact, what we've done is adopt the same approach that Waveney District Council did in their 2000 and I think it's 18, wasn't it, Andrea? Was it 2018 the Waveney plan was adopted?
Carry on, Mrs. Minns.
Yeah, well, the 2018 plan at Waveney District Council. So there was a precedent set.
2019, if you need that.
2019, okay. Well, there's been a precedent set about how delivery is dealt with. And it's not, as I say, that is part of the reason of Dr. Russ Ryan's appointment, is not just to leave it purely to the development management system, is to take a proactive role and working with families to find pocket sites. Now, you have to look at that within the context of the fact that Ipswich Borough Council largely develops, well, through, we've got quite high-ish windfall housing that comes forward, and about 40% of all housing in Ipswich is very small sites. So there is not that you can never have an absolute certainty, but there is certainly a reasonable chance of sufficient sites coming forward, meeting the criteria, because we already have a system of local and district centres and the schools, and the way that we work within the wards and for provision of good services. And there's not the problem of isolation, because it is a highly urban authority. So I think we would be able to meet that. And that, as I say, as a model, there is a track record through Henniker Road that has been a very successful model. So that's why we've adopted that particular approach.
Has that approach worked? So that was the approach in the current local plan.
Yeah.
Has that approach worked in meeting needs in the current local plan? So there's a need for 24 permanent pitches in the current local plan. So has relying on sites coming forward achieved that purpose?
We've had a few pre-apps, but nothing has actually come forward to actually be delivered. That the Henniker Road site was the last one that was approved, as far as I'm aware. The council did look at allocating a site within the last plan in the preferred options, but it was rejected. So it's not as if we as a council have sat and done nothing. There have been some positive action. But what we've, through my intervention, what we've been doing is taking a more rounded approach, a more corporate approach, involving both planning and housing to work proactively together.
Okay. Dr. Ross Ryan, you had your hand up.
Sally's gone on to say what I was going to say, and hence why we've been brought in to help liaise with the families, to help identify land rather than just leaving it to chance.
So I come back to my question. Well, there are two questions here. One is, does that approach meet the requirements of paragraph 10 of the PPTS? And secondly, is that approach justified given that it hasn't met the needs that were identified in the current plan? Sorry, you're on mute, Mrs. Minns. I think you were speaking.
Well, I think it's only in the last few years. If you think the adopted plan is only 2017, so that came about at the same time as this report. So in effect, it's only been around for under 3 years. So I don't think we can say necessarily that we have underachieved in terms of what is proposed. And as I say, there have been various attempts to do a broad sweep of sites, but it wasn't until the 2017 ANA that it was identified that the community itself did prefer smaller sites. And the smaller site need actually came out from that. In fact, I think I've got a reference to the paragraph. Let's have a check here. But the main point is that it was identified through the 2017 ANA. So until that information was in the public domain, we wouldn't have known that was what the local community wanted, because we were taking an approach with this bigger site.
Yeah. But that was the 2017 ANA.
Yes, and we're not finished in 2020 yet, nearly, but
2017 ANA. So it's 3 years. Obviously, in that time, you've been preparing a new local plan. Given the needs that were identified in the 2017 ANA, the question is whether the approach you're now taking, which is not to identify sites, but to rely on a proactive development management process to bring sites forward, whether that guarantees the supply that's necessary to meet needs over the next 5 years, and whether that satisfies the requirements of the PPTS.
Well, I think also that the other thing is that the wider site, West Meadows, that we have has more than sufficient land to probably take the whole need if we wanted to, but obviously we wouldn't like to see that approach.
But that's not part of your evidence. That's not part of your evidence.
Well, that was... well, anyway, what basically your question was to whether or not we could actually provide additional sites to meet our need, and I believe we can. And I also believe that there is additional capacity that lies within the existing West Meadows site, which could address that as well. And we have put in a fail-safe, a risk issue, if you like, to actually readdress it if that doesn't work. We've not sort of you know, we are working proactively, and we have got a system in place to deal with that if it doesn't deliver.
Could I just, sir, are you asking specifically about the 5-year position?
I am, but there is also the
of course
long-term requirement as well.
There are other things to come on to, but I just wonder if everybody talks first about the 5-year position, if that might clarify things, and then you're interested in the 10-year position. So in terms of the 5-year need and supply, I wonder if Mrs. Minns or Dr. Russ Ryan can help on that specifically.
Yes, we've actually, you know, according to our information, we've just underneath meeting that. If it could be argued that we have met that, but as I say, that is based on, you know, professional interviews and various other information. Plus, we've got this brand new aerial photograph, which is over 20.
The first 5 years, though.
Yes, well, the first 5 years starts in 2017. I mean, in the base year, which was 2016, we had 39 occupied pitches and 5 were vacant. So that was a position where we had a base of 44 already. And that is reflected in the table that was submitted in Dr. Russ Ryan's evidence. Yeah. And basically within the plan period, we've had 7 pitches have been made available, and we've also provided a additional 5. So you basically we calculate from the information and preliminary work investigations that have taken part that we've increased the supply by 10. When the additional need in 2017 was 13. But that was reduced because of the miscalculation of the sites which were subdivided at the beginning. So if you put it like that, what basically happened was we were identified originally in 2017 as having a need of 13. Then some pitches were subdivided, which meant the need was reduced by 4 because that was within the time frame of around 2017. So in effect, we have supplied 10 is what we calculate, and our need at that point was only 9 because of the subdivisions which had been taken very shortly after the provision of the ANA. So that's how it works. So the answer is yes, we calculate that we have.
You're counting as the first 5-year period then, 2016 to 21, yeah?
Yes, we'd be taking from the the base year is 2007. With the period of the ANA is 2017, but that took the base year as 2016.
Yeah, but when the plan is adopted, when the assumption is adopted, let's say in April 2021 or mid 2021, from that point, the 5-year period will be 21 to 26.
Yeah, so and for that period, we only need an additional 4. From the under the existing 2017 ANA. So we were admittedly in the early stages of the ANA, we had a much larger supply that was required for a number of reasons, as we've both Kate and I have explained. We've met that need, or we have estimated through the work that's been done, we've met that need.
Can I just stop you there, please? Please. You're just going on and on, I'm afraid, and you're not getting to the point that I really want to get to. You've already talked about the 16 to 21. I'm talking about 21 to 26. You've said there's a need of 4. So my question is, does the plan meet the requirements of the PPTS, given that it doesn't identify any sites to meet that need over the next 5-year period from adoption, 2021 to 2026? Address that particular question.
Right. COVID has put us back by about 3 months in the work that was commissioned, which was commissioned before submission of the plan, by the way. So it's a question of, until we've done that work, we can't really determine that. But what I can say is that we are planning that there will be time to get that work completed by the end of 2021, which is the end of the 5-year period.
So, okay. My final question on 50 and 51 is, were we to conclude that the plan is not positively prepared or not consistent with national policy in providing for the accommodation needs of gypsies and travellers, what are the options available to the council to make the plan sound in that regard? And are there sites that could be allocated and brought forward to meet the needs from 2021 to 2026?
Well, yes, I would say there are sites, but again, I would prefer to work with the community rather than doing to the community. So I think that's something we'd have to work with them to make sure they were suitable and met their needs and the criteria in the plan. But once again, I would say that very recently the Inspectorate approved a plan which was after the point that this PPS was in place, and that was approved in within the reasonable time frame, and that sets a precedent that it's not unusual when you take this approach to deliver in that way. And that was passed by those inspectors. So I just wondered why it's become an issue. So, within such a short time frame, when we're in an extremely difficult position.
Well, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of your evidence, really. We've not reached any conclusions on it at this stage. And aware that this is dealt with in a number of different ways. What I'm trying to understand is looking at the policy framework, the national policy framework, whether what the plan currently proposes is consistent with that. And from what I can see, because there are no sites identified for the next 5-year period, that it would suggest that there is an issue over consistency with national policy. So I hear what you say about hoping to complete that work. So it is effectively what you're saying, that the COVID period, which started in March of this year, has prevented the council from identifying sites that could be allocated in this plan.
Yes, from the point of view is we don't do it to people, we do it with people, and it's the being able to work with the community has been the stumbling block.
Yeah, but your plan was ready for submission, wasn't it, in March?
Well, it sort of wasn't. I came back from sick leave, and that's why we had to delay, because it wasn't.
So prior to COVID, it was ready for submission. So a question in my mind is just why sites were not able to be identified in the period before submission in the Reg 18 or Reg 19.
Well, the position was at that time that we felt that we'd left sufficient time within the contract with Dr. Russ Ryan to have completed that piece of work before we needed to write our matters and issue statements. But unfortunately, that didn't actually happen, because obviously I know that we had the first lockdown, but it's not just the lockdown incidences, it's also the incidences of what I've said previously, which is about the high levels of high potential levels of COVID within the travelling and gypsy community because of the sheltering that's going on. So it wasn't safe for us to go out to do that.
Please listen to the question. I'm not asking about the COVID period. I'm asking about the period before that. So the plan was ready to be submitted in March of this year, prior to the start of COVID, and it was delayed submission because of COVID. What I'm asking for is why in the period before that, in preparing the plan at Reg 18 and Reg 19, were sites not identified at that stage to meet the needs that the council was already aware of from the 2017 A&A?
because basically we took the view that we wanted to follow the option that Waveney District Council of the time had adopted, and we decided to do that in the same way, and that had been found sound. So, you know, whilst I'm very familiar with the PPS, it's also about what is happening locally within the framework of Suffolk, and that was, you know, a pretty recent plan. It's quite similar to Ipswich because Lowestoft is a large centre of population. I know it's got a rural hinterland, but it is based on a large centre of population, and it felt equivalent. And that was a management decision which decided to take that option. And given, if you look at what we have provided, and the amount of pitches which is required between 2021 and 2026 is only 4, you know, it's not a massive number, and I'm sure that we can do that. And I think that's underlined by the fact that we you know, small sites for housing purposes of all kinds come forward relatively quickly, easily, and make up the majority of our planning applications.
Yeah, those are housing sites, but
well, I consider housing. Yeah. No,
let me ask the question.
Sorry, it was coming in and out. I didn't have a full. I couldn't hear you.
Just let me ask the question. So that's housing sites.
Mm-hmm.
Does the same assumption on windfall transfer across to sites for gypsy and traveller accommodation? And if so, where is the evidence for that?
Well, we look at gypsy and travelling community pitch space as a subset of housing requirements. And because we're only looking for very small sites, because the record of development management for at least 10 years has been small sites, that working with communities, finding 4 pitches, I don't think will be very difficult.
But has that been achieved in the past? That's what I'm saying. Is there evidence from in the past or windfall? Well,
the Henniker Road site, I know admittedly it was older than I thought it was, but you know, that, as I say, I go back to the fact that you know, I've only been here since I was here briefly from 2017 to 2018, and then came back to the authority. So I wasn't actually working for the authority during the last plan. But it is certain they did attempt to find a site. That wasn't successful. They took a different approach. And it's the evidence which is within the 2017 ANA, which clearly indicates, which we didn't have prior to that, that the gypsy and travelling community were keener on having smaller sites. And that's what we're trying to promote. You wouldn't put in a housing site in a plan for under 10 units. And I think we've taken the equivalent really for the gypsy and traveller sites. And given, had we needed to find 25, I think we might have taken a different approach. But the approach was only for 4. We had expected to be further on, and that is why it hasn't happened. But, you know, there's a mixture of things here. There was a management decision that was the approach we were taking. We were looking at the precedent set through Waveney District Council in terms of allocating sites, and they didn't allocate there. And that the need that we were thinking of in risk terms was very small. And that, coupled with the rate of applications that come forward for general housing, indicates that because they are small sites, there would be somewhere that we could find that's suitable. And the Henniker Road site, for example, is in the settled community. It's not sort of in 2 pitches hived off somewhere else. It's actually part of the settled community. So it would be the equivalent in terms of what we'd be looking at.
I ask again, you know, other than Henniker Road, which is you've acknowledged is came forward some time ago now, where is the evidence recently of windfall sites coming forward for gypsy and traveller accommodation?
Well, we haven't yet.
Yeah.
But
So-
what I'm saying was we have actually met our 5-year land supply from the first 5 years as identified in the A&A. And our next 5 years is 4 sites, 4 pitches.
Yeah. Okay, so there's no evidence of windfall sites coming forward for Gypsy and traveller accommodation on which you can justify.
No. Well, there has been attempts, but nothing has got forward to a planning application stage.
Yeah. So there isn't evidence that you can rely on to justify that approach.
Well, the difference is that we've got Kate on board, who has a very good reputation of working with the local community. The section I particularly enjoyed in the A&A of the 2017 was getting more of an understanding of what the needs of the community were, and it's quite clear she's got the trust of that community, and that is the difference. That is the added plus.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ross Ryan, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, that's okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the final question, 52, which relates to transit sites or short stay stopping sites. So question 52 was, would the modifications proposed by the council to policy CS11 to allow flexibility in addressing the need for short stay stopping sites within Suffolk ensure the appropriate provision is made within the planned period? So this may well be something that Mrs. Macmillan, you might want to come in on as well. So, so I've noted I think it's MM34 in the consolidated set of modifications, but essentially there is a modification to the section of the policy CS11 towards the end that deals with short stay or short stay stopping sites, I think it says, but short stay stopping sites. So I note there's a change, and I note that revised wording has been agreed with East Suffolk. My question really to both the Ipswich Borough Council and to East Suffolk Council is, how does that suggested main modification on short stay stopping sites across the county, how does that do anything more than ensure, do anything more to ensure the provision of transit sites? I think that's so I can see that it says the council will work with Suffolk County Council and other local authorities in Suffolk to deliver identified needs for short stay stopping sites within Suffolk. How does that ensure provision is made? Mrs. Minns.
Yes, basically, I won't go into the details because I did at the beginning, but basically there is a joined up Suffolk-wide and it partially in conjunction with Norfolk way of provision. Basically, transit sites are quite an old-fashioned way of doing things now, and that wrapped up in the approach that is being taken by the two groups, one strategic, one operational, is to also deal with the unauthorised element. So what was recommended in the A&A was that the ISPA authorities in particular, because it was directed towards that, took a dual approach to how we deal with stopping places, if you like. So that part of that was provision of short stay stopping points, which were agreed, because what we find in this part of the world is that there are established routes that gypsies and travellers use within the region. So there's often the main route is along the A14 up the A12 and sometimes branching off into the more rural areas. So there are every local authority has been working informally together to liaise to make sure we avoid prosecution, try and work together to make sure that the needs are addressed, etc., etc. before moving on. So I think what the local authorities in Suffolk are doing is to try and make sure that they limit the amount of prosecution that's actually required. So apart from the site element, there's also a negotiated county-wide negotiated stopping policy which is being formulated. And that is a very modern approach. It happens a lot in London, and it also happens in, I think it was Leeds. And what you do is you create almost like a charter type thing, which is signed up to by all the agencies who are involved with the Gypsy and travelling community. And there's agreement between those agencies and the individual family that they will agree to meet the requirements that are in that stopping policy. And then they are only prosecuted if they don't meet those. So it's a much more modern approach because there have been, in the East Anglian context, transit provision has not always been very successful. So, for example, in North Norfolk, they have 2 transit camps which have not been successful, largely because they're very dusty and they still have quite high levels of unauthorised activity. And there's...
Just stop you there, Mrs. Minns. Sorry, just stop you there. The wording of the policy, the revised wording of the policy says that the council is committed to deliver identified needs for stopping sites. So it does say that the work's going to deliver sites. Put the short stay stopping policy to one side for the moment. So my question is about how does that wording help to deliver sites? How does that revised wording help to deliver sites? Because I couldn't see in there any, or in the supporting text, any reference to, you know, need figures or supply targets or dates by which stopping sites would be provided. So I have no sort of context as to what scale that might be at, and whether or not it's been effective in delivering stopping sites previously. So that's my question. Perhaps Ms. Macmillan Mr. Macmillan could help as well. How does that wording take us further forward in terms of addressing the need for sites?
Did you want me to answer there, or to come in there with the sort of East Suffolk Council's sort of view based on the Statement of Common Ground? I mean, essentially, our representation in the Statement of Common Ground was reflecting the agreement that's in the ISPA Statement of Common Ground in relation to as Mrs. Minns, I think, has sort of previously explained, the Suffolk-wide work. We've got an approach that's set out in the Suffolk Coastal Local Plan that does refer to the need that's been identified, and that this agreed Suffolk-wide approach is the way that the authorities have agreed to take this need forward. And so the Statement of Common Ground that we have signed up to was essentially just seeking to ensure that the wording reflected that approach rather than being sort of perhaps more spatially specific as was in the submitted plan. So hopefully that sort of clarifies that point.
So what are the identified needs for transit sites?
Is that a question for ourselves or for Ipswich?
It's a question for you both, but yeah, perhaps you would help in answering it. It seems to be a county-wide need rather than an Ipswich-specific need, as I understand it.
That's right, yes. And if I just sort of take you to the ISPA Statement of Common Ground, under outcome C5, it does state there that the need is for 2 to 3 short stay stopping sites that are identified across Suffolk. It's been identified as a need across Suffolk through the study.
Okay, and what is the work that's going on then jointly to address that need?
There's Basically, as I say, through the Suffolk approach, they realised that it was too large. There were too many people attending the meeting, so they subdivided it so that they could focus on the strategic side and then the operational side. In other words, working closer with the Gypsy and travelling community. So as part of that, as I say, led through housing officers, but also senior management are involved in the strategic side, and also involving the NHS improvement arm, which since the devolution of community services is now located in the county council rather than with the NHS. But the high level officers in those areas would have been looking at that and provided funding for a part-time officer, which has been jointly funded by the authorities, who works over 2 days and is hosted through East Suffolk.
Yeah. So what work is progressing to find sites, 2 to 3 short stay stopping sites? How is the work progressing?
Well, I understand, as I said, probably in the wrong place during this hearing, that I do understand that there has been a fair amount of work going on, and that there are 2 to 3 sites which are looking very promising, but they're not in the public domain, so we're not able to confirm exactly where they are. But that is my understanding. Obviously, Andrea, as your authority hosts that person, can you update us on that?
I don't think I can. I haven't got anything additional to say on top of what Mrs. Minns has said there on the project. As Mrs. Minns has said, the officer is hosted at East Suffolk Council, but it is a Suffolk-wide project.
Yeah. So where I'm trying to get to is one of these sites within Ipswich? Is there a need to identify this site within the plan to meet those needs? Are those sites simply going to be brought forward through a development management process?
They're going through a positive allocation process is where they will actually probably come to. And I can confirm that none of those sites are within the Ipswich boundary.
Okay, so they would be allocated within local plans across Suffolk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Apologies. Can I just come in there? I believe the approach is that they will be taken forward through the development management process, unless things have moved on since my sort of previous understanding.
Okay, Mrs. Minns, is that correct?
Well, as I say, yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just a bit of clarification, just a couple of final questions, and then we can conclude. In policy CS11 and at paragraph 144, there is reference to the needs of travelling show people to be kept under review, and applications for new sites will be assessed against the criteria. And 144 talks about that the authorities will work together to identify or to meet the needs of travelling show people. My question was just, as I understood it, the 2017 A&A didn't identify any specific accommodation needs for that particular sector of the travelling community. No. So it's just perplexing as to why that's in the plan if there isn't an identified need for it.
it's in the plan because obviously needs change over time. So we would be reassessing the position to see if that needed altered. It's not unusual not to require accommodation for travelling show people because they usually have their own sites where they retire to the winter and keep all their equipment, etc. there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. Ms. Baker, I don't know if there's any questions that you wanted to ask.
No, I don't have anything further. You've covered everything, so thank you. I think Ms. Tafour might have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Tafour. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's not a question, sir. It's just a very brief kind of summary, if I might. So what I would say is that as has been explained, the need for the 5-year period 2021 to 26 is for 4 additional pitches. The council considered that there is sufficient capacity at the existing West Meadow site to accommodate those 4 pitches. And we can submit the aerial photograph that Mrs. Minns was discussing, if that would be helpful. Obviously, policy CS11 says that sites that are currently used by gypsies and travellers are protected for that use. And so the council's position is that 5-year need can be accommodated on the site. Their approach has, following the adoption of the Waveney local plan and the approach that was adopted there, and just for your reference, I think it's policy WLP 8.5 in the Waveney local plan. The council has tried to adopt perhaps a slightly more modern approach of working with the gypsy and traveller community to see how they would prefer their needs to be met, as Mrs. Mimmons was explaining, so to work collaboratively with them rather than imposing decisions upon them. And that work has been slightly delayed, as you've heard, this year. But if your view was that there was that the way in which the need for those 4 additional pitches to be met had to be identified within the plan, then the protection of the West Meadow site already incorporated into policy CS11 would serve that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would have been incredibly helpful to have known that before today. That
Yes.
wasn't apparent in the council's evidence. Whether that's emerged from the discussion today, I'm not sure, but I didn't see it in any of the evidence. If I've missed it, my apologies, but it
No,
was.
so apologies. We should have made that clearer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's helpful. Certainly, it would be very helpful to have the updated version of table 8.3, please. Translating the 2020 updated figures into that table. Perhaps we can have the 2017 figures alongside the 2020 figures. And if it is now the council's position that there is capacity to meet the need for 2021 to 26 on the West Meadows site, then again, I think we would need a further submission from the council to that effect for us to consider that alongside the updated evidence. And I suggest that should take the form of some words, a suggested modification to the policy, but also some evidence to support that in terms of a plan of the West Meadows site and some evidence that that is achievable on the West Meadows site. Okay, thank you. Is there any more from anyone on Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation? Okay, thank you. We're going to adjourn there. We are due to resume proceedings on Tuesday next week now. so Tuesday the 15th of December. We have two reconvened or rearranged sessions. The first in the morning is a resumption of the session on Ipswich Garden Suburb, and in the afternoon then a rearranged session on the IP1 Area Action Plan. And then Wednesday we have a session probably for most of the day on the remaining development management policies in the plan. So without further ado, unless there's any other administration we need to deal with today, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we'll see the relevant people on Tuesday next week.
Thank you very much, sir.